All the Young Dudes, Sirius's Perspective by Rollercosterwords. Chapter 127, 7th Year, Responsibilities. Monday, the 9th of January, 1978. So it's just the Ferox letter still to post then? Sirius asked, sitting next to Remus in their usual carriage on the Hogwarts Express. He'd gone with him to the Muggle post office the day before to send off 2 letters, one to his mother and one to Grant. Mooney had written a 3rd letter for Ferox, the old Care of Magical Creatures professor. He'd been very upset to learn that the man had been injured during the Diagon Alley attack. Fortunately, the letter could be sent the usual way, by owl from the Hogwarts Owlery. Just the Ferox one, Remus confirmed, settling into his seat. Peter had rushed off to find Dorcas the moment they boarded the train, and James and Lily had to ride in the prefect's carriage, which left the remaining 2 boys completely alone. Sirius decided to take advantage of the space, reclining sideways and stretching his legs out over Remus's lap. He grinned up, arms behind his head, and Remus raised a brow. "Make yourself comfortable, why don't you?" "Don't mind if I do," Sirius yawned, then asked, "So, which letter are you most looking forward to getting a reply from?" "Which letter am I most looking forward to?" Remus shot him a wry smile. "You mean between my battle-wounded ex-teacher and my young offender ex-boyfriend, or the mother who abandoned me?" "Well, when you put it like that," Sirius rolled his eyes. "Honestly, the amount of stuff you keep back." "Would you rather I was whining all the time?" Remus pulled out a book, cracking it open on top of Sirius's legs. "No," he sighed thoughtfully. "But, I mean, if you didn't have me to talk to about all this stuff, I'd be worried about your head exploding." "It would not explode, thank you very much," Remus huffed, slapping him lightly with the worn paperback. "You're so dramatic. I coped perfectly well before you decided to involve yourself." "How?" "Well," Remus hesitated, biting his lip. You'll think it's stupid." "What?" "I make lists in my head, benefits and losses, and sometimes I have pretend conversations, to help me work through a problem." "Bloody hell, Mooney." Sirius pushed himself up, staring. "You complete nutter." This earned a laugh, and Remus rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, okay, maybe a bit mental." Sirius moved his legs, sitting upright so he could scoot closer on the seat. "Ever had an imaginary conversation with me?" He rested his chin on the older boy's shoulder, murmuring the words into his ear. "No," Remus replied, shutting his eyes and swallowing as Sirius breathed into his neck. "I only have imaginary conversations with sensible people." "Well," Sirius leaned even closer, "maybe that's where you're going wrong." He began to kiss him softly, just behind the earlobe. Mooney squirmed, dropping his book, and Sirius felt a slow pulse of heat creeping through his blood at the stifled noise that Remus made. The door rattled open abruptly, and the 2 of them shoved apart as Marlene burst through. There was another girl following behind her, Yasmin. Sirius recognised her from the Quidditch team. "Oh!" Marlene stopped short, blushing furiously. "Thought this car was empty." "Aha!" Sirius thought, glancing between the 2 girls. He didn't try to stop the amused smile that spread across his face, leaning back casually in his seat. "Nope." He shot a wink at the dark-haired girl, nodding. "Patel?" "Remus, have you met Yasmin?" Marlene asked, voice a bit strained as she took a seat opposite Mooney. "She's the new keeper." "Oh, right. Hiya." Remus waved stiffly. "No Mary?" Remus asked innocently, enjoying the guilty blush that crept across Marlene's cheeks. "No Mary," Yasmin replied, smirking like the cat that had got the cream. "She's talking to one of the Ravenclaw prefects," Marlene interjected. "It's not as if we're deliberately avoiding her or anything." Sirius bit his lip, as if to keep from laughing. He grinned at Marlene, unable to keep the teasing smile off his face. "What were you 2 up to, then?" It was Yasmin who answered, raising her eyebrow and looking pointedly between him and Remus. "Nothing. What were you 2 up to?" "Bugger," Sirius thought, sitting up straighter. Next to him, Remus had gone rigid, eyes wide as he stared at Patel.
Nothing.
Well then, Marlene cleared her throat, leaning back against her seat. We'll leave it at that then, shall we? Fine, Sirius shrugged, folding his arms over his chest. Yasmin giggled, scooting a bit closer to Marlene, and Remus stared at them, perplexed. What are we leaving where? He demanded, as they walked up to the owlery later that evening. They were moving slowly. Remus was out of breath, panting by the time they made it to the top. Moony. Really? He shook his head, laughing. Someone as observant as you hasn't noticed anything different about Marlene lately.
I don't know what you're talking about, Remus grumbled, gripping the banister as they made their way up the spiral staircase.
Come on, Moony, Sirius nudged him. Marlene and Yaz.
Don't tell me you didn't see. They were all over each other before they realised the carriage was empty.
Honestly, he was surprised that Remus had never noticed. He had always been closer with Marlene, especially once Sirius was no longer on the Quidditch team. But the revelation seemed to take Moony by complete surprise. He stopped in the middle of the stairs, blinking.
You mean Marlene is...
Yep.
And Yasmin...
Yep.
Bloody hell.
Yep. Sirius shot him a wicked grin. Can't believe you hadn't figured it out already.
Well, Remus tutted, as they rounded the last few steps. I'm pretty impressed that you did, seeing as you apparently had no idea about me after we'd been shagging for about a year.
It wasn't a whole year, Sirius protested, glancing around the room to ensure that it was empty before continuing. Remus followed behind him, breathing heavily. Sirius leaned by the window and selected an owl, looking out over the forbidden forest.
So if Marlene knows, Remus said pointedly, trailing off as he tied the letter to the leg of the bird.
Yeah, I know. Sirius ran a hand through his hair. James next.
I don't mean to keep bringing it up, Remus said, sounding a bit sheepish as he sent the owl through the nearest window.
No, I promised I would do it, Sirius sighed. Anyway, this term is going to be enough of a nightmare with Newts and the wall. Rather not have anything else to worry about.
Are you nervous?
Shitting myself.
Lovely, Remus said dryly, moving to stand next to him. Can I help?
Not if you're going to suggest me having an imaginary conversation with Prongs.
Oh, I don't see why not, Remus smiled teasingly. Prongs is easy to do. Nice and predictable.
Unlike some, Sirius replied, glancing at him. Anyway, it's not what he'll say that I'm worried about. I know what he'll say. It'll be like it was when you,
came out, Remus supplied.
Sirius swallowed, nodding. I know he'll be his usual righteous self. I'm more worried about the stuff he doesn't say.
Well, Remus sighed, shrugging. There's nothing you can do about that.
I know, Sirius thought, stomach twisting. That's why I'm so bloody terrified. Black. Oi, Padfoot. The mirror in his pocket began to buzz with James's voice, shouting insistently. Sirius shook his head, pulling it out and flipping it open. Speak of the devil. Where are you, Tosser? James demanded, face squashed so close to the mirror that Sirius could only see one of his eyes. Owlery. Moony with you? Yup. Dumbledore wants him. Right now, Sirius frowned, looking up at Remus. The other boy had gone stiff beside him. Right now, James confirmed. It was an hour before Remus stepped out from behind the stone gargoyle, shoulders sagging in exhaustion. Sirius leapt forward, pushing off the wall he'd been leaning against. He, James, Peter and Lily had been standing outside of Dumbledore's office for nearly 40 minutes. Well, Sirius demanded, scanning his face, as if he might be able to find some sort of clue as to what had transpired. None of them had been able to think of any reason that Dumbledore would want to speak to Remus so soon after term had started. Remus blinked, looking at them. Come on, Lily pushed past Sirius, taking Moony's arm in hers. You don't have to tell us. We just want to know you're okay. Of course he has to tell us, Sirius corrected sharply. Remus shot him a look, frowning.
Can we go somewhere a bit more private? Not the common room.
Dorm room? Peter asked.
Yeah. Remus remained stubbornly silent for the entire walk back to Gryffindor Tower, refusing to say even one word. Sirius had to stifle the urge to interrogate him, shoving down his questions until they were buzzing in his stomach, his chest, the back of his throat. He was just about ready to burst out of his skin by the time they finally reached their dorm room. Lily came up with them, arm firmly linked with Remus's, and sat down on James's bed, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for her to be right there. Remus sat too, settling down on the lid of his trunk. "So," Sirius demanded, fighting the urge to bite his nails, "what did Dumbledore want?" "He gave me an assignment," Remus said faintly, staring down at the threadbare rug, with a dazed sort of expression on his face. "He what?" James yelped. "He gave you, not any of us." "James," Lily frowned, reaching out to touch his arm. "It's obviously something Remus is best suited for." "Werewolves," Sirius breathed. His blood had gone cold. He thought of the previous year, the panic of waking up to find Moony gone in the middle of the night. Remus glanced up at him, smiling in a way that was probably supposed to be reassuring, but only succeeded in making Sirius's heart twist. "Yeah. Done it before, haven't I?" "You've done..." Lily began to speak, but stopped herself, seeming to think better of it. "What does he need from you? Why now?" "They think there's one in Hogsmeade," Remus said, swallowing. "The centaurs told him, or something." He looked back down, fidgeting with his hands. "Dumbledore wants me to, make my presence known next time I'm in town, to see if it, takes the bait." "Bait?" Sirius couldn't stop his voice from pitching up, aware that he was almost shouting. Remus glanced back at him, warily. "It's just an expression." "Not a great one," Peter said anxiously, frowning. "Sorry," Remus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Don't worry about me. If there is a werewolf, and it's one of Greyback's, then I don't think I'm in any danger. He wants me to join him, remember?" Like that was supposed to make him feel any better. "Yeah," Sirius said bitterly. "I remember getting my own invitation to join that side." Remus looked away again. "It's not going to be like that," he mumbled, sounding as if he were trying to convince himself as much as he was them. "Nothing might happen at all. They might not even be here for me. And I was okay last time, wasn't I?" "Only because Ferox showed up." Sirius could feel his anger building, simmering just below his skin. Remus couldn't confront the werewolves. He just couldn't. "I know, but I'm of age now. I'll know what to expect." The taller boy spoke steadily, giving Sirius a hard stare. "It's too dangerous, Remus." Lily began to speak, but he cut her off. "I know that too, but I wasn't exactly given a choice." Remus wasn't quite shouting, but he raised his voice. Lily shrank back, pursing her lips and staring down at her hands. Sirius took a breath. "When?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice even. "Next Hogsmeade weekend." "That's in 2 weeks," James murmured. "After the next moon." "They're going to increase security in the village, obviously," Remus said, after last time. "Okay, I'm going to need a few things explained here," Lily said slowly, brow furrowing. "James, would you?" Remus asked. "I think I just want to go to bed." "Yeah, of course." James straightened, looking more grounded now that he had something to do. "We can talk about this tomorrow, when everyone's had some time." "Thanks." Remus attempted to smile, pressing his hands to his knees and pushing himself up to his feet. "Moony," James stepped towards him, remorseful. "I didn't mean that you shouldn't get an assignment, or that you can't do it or anything." "I know." Remus reached out to pat his shoulder. "Believe me, if you or Sirius could do it instead, I wouldn't be Dumbledore's first pick." "I suppose I just got lucky, eh?" Sirius didn't miss the bitter twist to those words. He didn't think James did, either. But neither of them said anything as Remus shut himself in the bathroom, listening as the sound of running water started to pick up from the sink.
James sighed heavily, turning back to face the rest of them. "Let's go down to the common room, yeah?" he suggested. "Give him a bit of space." Peter and Lily nodded, heading for the door immediately, but Sirius stayed. "Mate," James tried tiredly, "it's really not the time for an argument. Come on." "I'm not going to argue with him," Sirius shrugged him off, offended. "I'm just—" He hesitated, swallowing. "You shouldn't be alone right now, James." The other boy regarded him for a moment, studying his face. Finally, he clapped Sirius on the back. "All right. The rest of us will be downstairs, okay?" "Okay," Sirius nodded. James shut the door behind him on his way out, leaving Sirius alone in the empty room. He hovered in front of the bathroom door, unsure as to whether he should knock. Just as he was about to raise his fist, the lock clicked, the door swung open. Remus stood in front of him, eyes wide, shoulders trembling. Sirius released a breath. "You okay?" Remus swallowed. Something broke a little behind his eyes. "No." He moved forward, and Sirius wrapped him in his arms, wishing he could do more. Chapter 128. 7th Year, Preparation. Tuesday, the 9th of January, 1978. "Right, Mooney," James announced decisively, face hidden behind the towering stack of books in his arms. He dropped them with a resounding thud onto the table, directly in front of Remus. The poor boy jumped, blinking up in shock. "What are these?" He squinted down at the stack, picking up a book off the top. "Potter?" Lily glanced over with a bemused smile, looking both shocked and somewhat proud. "Have you been in the library? In the morning? Instead of flying?" "We need to get Mooney prepared, Lily." "But you said mornings were sacred to you," Sirius gasped. "You said you had to pay homage to the gods of the Quidditch pitch," Peter reminded him. "I can miss one morning," James huffed, folding his arms. "Prongs," Remus swooned theatrically, reaching out to grab his hand. "I'm touched." "Get off," James ripped his hand away, cheeks going pink. "You can all stop making fun of me. Am I the only one taking this seriously?" "Hey," Sirius grinned, ignoring the other marauders' anticipatory groans. "I'm always serious." Peter shook his head, Remus rolled his eyes, James made a disgusted noise in the back of his throat. But Lily, who had not yet developed an immunity to the joke, began to laugh, snorting so hard that tea shot out of her nose. This sent all of them into a bout of hysterics that lasted for the next 5 minutes. Any attempts to calm down were thwarted by James's eyebrow waggling and Lily's helpless snorts. By the end of it, Sirius's stomach hurt from laughing so hard, and he found himself gasping for breath. Everyone had perked up a bit by the time they headed to their lessons, imbued with a sense of determination. On a suggestion from James, they decided to meet every day in the library after last bell, combining their efforts to research and practice new spells with Remus. By the end of the week, they had taken possession of 6 desks in the back corner, shoving them all together and marking them with the sign that Peter made, which read, "Marauders War Council, do not disturb." Lily even went so far as to place a charm on the little paper plaque, so that it would scream viciously if anyone ever tried to sit down in their spot, making it impossible to study. Their peers caught on quickly, steering clear. Almost all other duties were abandoned. Christopher took over Remus's study groups, Marlene began running 2 of James's Quidditch sessions, and Lily explained to Professor Slughorn that she wouldn't be able to make it to Slug Club that week due to an extracurricular project. Sirius even took a step back from pranking. He was pretty sure that it was the first week in over 2 years that he had gone without so much as dropping a dung bomb in the hallway. Instead, all the Marauders' focus was poured into the same goal, preparing Remus for Dumbledore's mission. They spent most of their time on defensive spells, covering almost an entire year's worth of Defence Against the Dark Arts material in 1 week, thanks to James's careful tutelage. A good bit of time was additionally spent on offensive hexes and jinxes. James and Sirius were both banned from the restricted section, so they had to send Lily and Remus to check out the new books that contained more advanced material. They all got very good at silencing spells, which they had to cast over the desk so that Remus would actually practice the jinxes he was studying without drawing Pince's wrath. For larger scale hexes, they practiced in the common room. "You're good at charms, and that's half the battle," James assured Remus one evening as they stood in front of the fireplace. "The rest is really just quick thinking and determination." "And we know you can do those," Lily chimed in, unfreezing all the sofa cushions they'd been practicing status charms on. "It won't be like in Diagon Alley," Sirius added, patting him on the back, "because you'll know what's coming. You've got time to get ready." Remus still looked nervous. "Easy enough to say," he muttered. "I'm okay with most of this here with you lot, but if I was actually defending myself, and I still can't do a Patronus." For some reason he was very hung up on Patronuses, perhaps because it was the only bit of magic that seemed to elude him. "Don't worry about that now. Just focus on the simpler stuff." James waved a hand. "The Patronus will come, mate. It's not as if you're not strong enough. You apparate like it's nothing." "Well, that's easy," Remus frowned. "That's just thinking. Patronuses are feeling." "Could somebody please let me down now?" Peter asked anxiously from where he'd been hanging frozen in mid-air. Sunday, the 14th of January, 1978. Remus seemed a bit more confident by the time the weekend rolled around. He was casting most of the spells they'd practiced with ease, and had built up quite a repertoire of offensive and defensive charms. Sirius knew that, even if everything went according to plan, he likely wouldn't even need to use any of the jinxes they'd been learning. After all, Dumbledore only wanted him to alert the other werewolf to his presence. It wasn't as if the headmaster was expecting Remus to duel him. Still, it was nice to know that Moony was prepared, just in case. All 5 of them spent the entire Saturday cooped up in the library. It wasn't as bad as Sirius had expected it to be, spending the whole day tucked behind books. They were near a window, where the sunlight chased away the shadows cast by the tall shelves, and he felt more grounded with all his friends there. It was easier to focus on the present moment, easier to stop himself from slipping through time, and even if it hadn't been, he would do anything for Moony. While they all planned to spend Sunday in the library as well, Lily had been called away to mediate a prefect dispute, and Peter had ended up having to serve a detention. This left only Remus, Sirius, and James working in their private little corner. Remus darted off to the restricted section, returning a few minutes later with the biggest book on curses that Sirius had ever seen. There are some second years on the other side of the hall, taking bets on whether we're actually behind studying for newts, or just planning the most amazing prank Hogwarts has ever seen," he informed them, dropping the tome with a heady thud onto the stack of the 3 other books. "I'm so proud of our legacy. Aren't you, Mr. Prongs?" Sirius paused his note-taking to grin at James from across the table. "Quite so, Mr. Padfoot. Quite so," James murmured without looking up, squinting down at a glossary. "Aha!" He reached for one of the books, scattered across the table, flipping rapidly through the pages. Sirius raised a brow. "Found something good?" "Maybe," James answered distractedly, eyes darting across the page. Remus picked up his gargantuan curse book, opening it up to the table of contents, and frowning as he read the chapter titles. "Okay," James got their attention. "Look at this." He flipped the book he was holding around so that Remus and Sirius, who were both sitting across the table, could read it. "I really think this sort of thing plays to your strengths, Moony. It's all intuitive stuff. A lot of punch behind it, the way you do pranks." The 2 of them stood, leaning forward to scan the page that James was pointing at. As they read, Remus reached up absent-mindedly to rub at his shoulder. He always seemed to be sore, somewhere, especially as it got closer to the moons. Sirius paused his reading, distracted by the hiss of pain that escaped Mooney's lips as he pressed down on the muscle right beside his neck. He always did it wrong, poking at his shoulders like he was angry with them, instead of kneading the way you were supposed to. Without thinking, Sirius shifted closer, stretching out a hand to rub circles over the sore spot. He pressed firmly, but gently, feeling the muscle begin to unlock under his fingers, and Remus sighed in relief. He was still reading when Remus shifted, nudging him slightly. He glanced up and was met with James' shocked gaze. Their friend was staring pointedly at the spot where Sirius's hand rested beside Remus's neck, mouth slightly agape, glasses slipping down his nose. Oh. Sirius stared back, realizing what James was seeing. For a moment, he considered brushing it off, stepping away, cracking a joke, unspooling the tension. It wasn't as if he'd snogged Remus. A shoulder massage could feasibly be written off as platonic. Except it wasn't. It very clearly wasn't, and James had obviously noticed. And what was the point in hiding it, if he'd already been seen? So Sirius didn't move away. Instead, he stepped closer, wrapping an arm deliberately around Remus's shoulders and squeezing gently. He didn't look away from James as he did it, holding the other boy's gaze. James blinked, still staring. He looked at Sirius, then Remus, then Sirius again. Finally, he shut his mouth and nodded once. Remus straightened up, allowing Sirius's arm to slide from his shoulders. He cleared his throat. I'm sure there's a book I've read which goes into more depth than this. I think I got a copy of it upstairs. I'll, just go and get it. See you in an hour or so, maybe? It was an obvious lie, but Sirius appreciated that he was doing it nonetheless. He and James nodded simultaneously, eyes still locked, and Remus hurried away without saying another word. They waited until he was out of sight, unmoving, unspeaking. Sirius realized he was holding his breath. A minute passed, in which he wondered if he should say something. That familiar anxiety was returning, the doubt that he had hoped was long gone. And then James opened his mouth. "What the fuck are you playing at?" Sirius blinked. What? Merlin Black. James broke his gaze finally, running a hand through his hair and glancing down at the table before he looked back. You and him? Yeah, Sirius swallowed. Me and him. James released a sharp breath, shaking his head. Fuck, Sirius, you can't. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. This is Mooney we're talking about, yeah? You can't just mess around like that. It isn't. Oi! Sirius straightened, bristling. I'm not messing around, you prick. What the fuck? James didn't back down, giving him a hard look. Well, I'm sorry, Pads, but you don't exactly have the best track record when it comes to relationships. He must have seen the hurt on Sirius's face, because he softened slightly, saying, Look, you're my best mate, yeah? But so is Mooney. So just... You promise this isn't like an experiment or something for you? No, Sirius said quietly. It's... He glanced down, swallowing the lump in his throat. It's really important to me, James. They were quiet for a bit. When Sirius looked up, James was studying him, brow furrowed. Is it? Sirius nodded, mute. James took a breath, placing his hands on the back of his head as he blew it out. Okay, he nodded, as if he were deciding something. Okay, when did this... how long have you... Look, Sirius interrupted him, fingers tapping anxiously on one of the desks. Can we go somewhere else? I'll answer all your questions, I promise. He glanced up at the bookshelves just a few feet away. I feel like I can't breathe in here right now. James nodded, blinking. Yeah, of course. Let me just... He nodded to the books. He shoved the books in his bag, then slung it over his shoulder. Quidditch, bitch. Sirius nodded gratefully, following him out. He felt a bit better once they were outside. It was cold, but not bitterly so. The air was sharp and fresh, invigorating. Sirius took a deep breath, turning back to James. "Okay," he said, attempting a smile. "Ask away." James shook his head, looking rather shell-shocked. After a moment, he asked, "How long?" That one's a bit tricky, actually. I guess this summer, sort of. Cornwall. That's when we, talked about it." "Talked about it? You mean it started before that?" Sirius nodded sheepishly. "When?" After I broke up with Mary, last year." "Last year?" "Yeah. Remember how you said you thought I'd been moody?" James shook his head, eyes wide. "I thought you were just moping over Mary." "Bloody hell, Sirius." "Yeah. I mean, bloody hell." "You said that already." James laughed shakily. "I know. Sorry. It's just a bit of a shock, that's all. Can't believe I didn't..." He frowned as if he'd just thought of something. "But what about Emmeline?" Sirius blinked. "What about her?" "I mean, things with you and Remus. Weren't you dating her?" Sirius flushed, looking down at the grass as they walked. "Yeah," he sighed. It's hard to explain. I was trying to keep everything separate, sort of." "Separate," James repeated, watching him. Sirius nodded. I mean, you know about my family. My mum, the sort of fucked with my head. About that stuff. Being, queer." Sirius winced. "I guess," he mumbled. "Yeah, that, or whatever." "Sorry," James said quickly. "I didn't mean to assume. If you're not comfortable with that, word..." "It's all right," Sirius shrugged. Yeah, I mean, I'm still not... bloody hell, it's easier now that Mooney's helped a lot. But really, I just couldn't really think about it last year. I didn't want to think that I could be, so I just tried to ignore it, or sort of talk myself out of it, I guess. But it only ended up making a mess of things. That's why stuff was so weird last spring between Remus and I." James nodded slowly, absorbing this. Sirius took a breath and continued. "Then, this summer, after Remus came out, I guess I sort of realised that it might be okay. I don't know how to explain it, right? I couldn't make myself believe that there was anything wrong with him, And so I thought, if it's all right for him, then maybe it's all right for me." James was staring at him, brow furrowed. "Padfoot," he breathed, shaking his head. "Of course it's all right, mate. There's nothing wrong with it. You know that, right?" Sirius closed his eyes for a moment, trying to swallow the lump in his throat. When he opened them again, James was studying him, concerned. "Sorry," he mumbled, looking back down at the ground. It means a lot, hearing you say that." James reached out, grasping his shoulder. "You're still my best mate, yeah?" Sirius smiled weakly. "Yeah." James grinned back, squeezing his shoulder. After a moment, he dropped his head, asking slowly, "Is that why you didn't tell me?" Sirius bit his bottom lip, nodding. James looked a bit hurt. "Did I do something to make you think that I wouldn't react well?" "No," Sirius assured him. "No, Prongs, it's nothing to do with you, I promise. I was just in my own fucked up head. After everything with Remus this summer, I know it should have been easy, but I just... I didn't want anything to change. Anything. And, this is a change. It's not, James said quickly. I swear, Padfoot. This doesn't change anything, okay? You and Remus, you're still my best mates. Nothing could ever change that. He looked so earnest that Sirius only nodded, not knowing what else to do. Okay. They walked in silence for a bit around the edge of the pitch. James cleared his throat. So, are you and he boyfriends then? Or is it Sirius? Yeah, Sirius breathed, tilting his head back to look up at the sky. Yeah, it's Sirius. He hesitated, then said quickly, I really, really care about him, James. It kind of scares me sometimes, if I'm being honest. James looked up, too, smiling wistfully. Yeah, he sighed. I think I know the feeling. By the time they caught sight of Lily and Remus sitting in the stands, they were high in the air, racing towards the goalposts on their brooms. They went for a few more laps, just to feel the wind whipping past their faces, before James pulled in next to him, hovering. Oi, Black! He called, just loud enough for Sirius to hear. Race you to your boyfriend. Oh, sod off, Potter! Sirius shouted back, falling into a dive immediately as they both plunged towards the stands. They landed at the same time, hitting the ground heavily. James grinned at him as he dismounted, and Sirius grinned back. They were both breathing heavily, sweating slightly from the exertion. All right, lads? Lily asked, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. Sirius only needed to take one look at the smile playing across her lips to know that Remus had told her. Needed a break, he panted. Change of scenery. Remus looked up at James, fidgeting with his hands. All right, Prongs? James turned to Sirius, smiling, then looked at Remus. He shook his head fondly, reaching down to haul the nervous boy to his feet. Come here, you big prat. He yanked Remus into a bear hug, laughing.